The thing is, as the definition of biological anthropology goes, the study of human biological variation, adaptation and evolution in time and space dimensions. So you can well imagine how broad it is. And physical anthropology is concerned with the sources of biological variation and directions of change among human groups, past and present. It's a huge task to unravel the biological tenets of this species called Homo sapiens. Now, if you see a biological anthropology text, you find all these are included in the book. And then, on the basis of that definition, you have to deal with all these. It starts with history and then finishes with teaching of biological anthropology. There are many biological anthropology texts, and more or less the topics are of this kind. Now, if we go back to the organization of the international anthropology congresses, it was in 1934, it started in London. And so far as the physical anthropology of that time concerned, emphasis was on the anatomy, the mostly comparative anatomy, anthropometry and standardization of anthropometric techniques. And then, of course, in 1978, we had 10th Congress in New Delhi. And you see the papers that dealt with all these topics, which is enormously broad. And then it suggests that Indian as well as anthropologists of other countries contributed to all these issues in dealing with biological anthropology. Now, naturally, we will be interested in the Indian scenario, and in India, it is a rich history. Racial studies in the colonial era, morphology, somatoscopy, population variation, there's a classification of Indian populations. These are all well known to all the biological anthropologists, even all the subdisciplines of anthropology as well. Risley, Guha, Sarkar, and then later, other people, Malhotra and others, also contributed to population classification. First races and then endogamous groups. Now we had legends. There's Guha, Gain Majumdar, S.S. Sarkar, Iravati Karve, Mitru, and of course there are many others over the time. And institutions, as you all know, Calcutta University is the beginner, and then you have Anthropological Survey of India, the rich tradition starting from 45, but before that they were in Indian Museum and also Zoological Survey. And of course Indian Statistical Institute because of the interest of Professor P.C. Mahanavis and his idea of interaction of natural and social sciences with statistics, his own dear and near subject. Now, what exactly is the contemporary scenario? Most university anthropology departments have biological anthropology specialization. And that is a fact. Anthropological Survey of India does research on physical anthropological issues, and Indian Statistical Institute, although a minuscule sort of unit, they also engage themselves in bioanthropological research or biocultural anthropological research as well as genetic research, human genetic research. Areas of research interest of contemporary biological anthropologists. This is basically a database from the internet of university teachers who are specialized in biological anthropology. Now, this is a snapshot. We have a sort of 15-20 universities, and we found that these are the certain topics, areas of interest, as reported by the teachers themselves. So you can understand the length and breadth of many different kinds of topics in biological anthropology as interested by the teachers. But then what actually they do, we have to have from their publications, and it is very difficult to get that data, and now I believe that some kind of a scan of this kind of publication hunt should also be there. Now, of course, there are MSc and PhD dissertations generally on these topics, depending on the choice of the teachers and the students. Of course, I have tried also to see the publications or in an Indian journal, say our own journal, Journal of the Indian Anthropological Society, for the last, for first to 49 volumes, and I found that these are the topics also covered for publications in that particular journal. Of course, there is a rider, because biological anthropologists also publish for their own subject matter in many different journals which are not ascribed to be a journal of anthropology exclusively. Now, I've also tried to analyze the trends of publication areas, and you find that in some of these you have a big trends of submission, and sometimes it is getting declined. So for that matter, genetic studies, the peak was in 76, 75, 85. And then what happened is, due to the increase and in development of technology, geneticists had to shift to some other journals, perhaps of genuine interest to the genetics or the genomics. Then, of course, there are biological trait studies, which is just a comparison or variation studies, and which actually is very declined from mid-70s. So it implies that the trend of biological anthropology also changes over time because of many different reasons. The reasons are, actually very interesting, but at the same time, it needs a lot of time for an actual explanation. Now, sometimes you have repeated presence, sometimes you have emergence in mid-80s and then increasing kind of things. So therefore, you have to also understand why this kind of publications are declining and why these are increasing. And in the JIAS, in the Journal of Indian Anthropological Society, I'm saying that there are very few review articles. People are not writing reviews. Very few on methodological issues. Methodological issues in biological anthropology are many and very complicated, and therefore they are not actually trying to, exercise the brain in doing this. This should have been done and should be done by us biological anthropologists very much on low. Extremely few on date populations. That is something which is missing in India for a very long time. And very few on primate studies, morphology, physiology, behavior, etc. This is just an example, and trends are most likely the same in other journals dealing with biological anthropology. So, my question was, are we doing biological anthropology of convenience? Whatever is available to us, get into that, and don't give much time and brain to explore other domains of biological anthropology. How our interest in a particular topic of research in bioanthropology is grown. It's my own interest, it is the interest of the teacher, or something else. There are issues of resources, of course, as many different stories have been told by my Prof, and of course in the morning our speakers. Of course, motivation, that depends on the teachers themselves, how they are motivated and how they are actually motivating their students. There are logistics, there are space problems, there are funds problems, there are many other problems. But as a matter of fact, we have to analyze this in order to understand whether we survive in this particular niche or we don't survive at all. The priorities of research in the 21st century in India should rest on the following topics. This is my own opinion, and of course this is a reasoned opinion, not just the stray thoughts. On the living populations, of course. Methodological issues including study design, more importance on longitudinal data generation, which is completely lacking in this particular country, and any sort of longitudinal data set that exists on different biological traits are belonging not to the anthropologists but to other disciplines as such. Genetic epidemiology, genomic studies, epigenetic studies, these are the craze of the day, and biochemists and other biological scientists, life scientists are doing this for humans, for other non-human primates, and also for other animals, and plants as well. But Anthropologists, as such, involving themselves into genomic studies, not very much. Not very much because of many reasons, because of the lack of laboratories and all kinds of things. But I think there are possibilities of engaging themselves in this kind of studies, because they answer new questions of evolution, of variation, and so on. Train and adoption studies. This gives you a kind of a relative importance of genetics and environment, and there was a good tradition in India about the twin studies, but somehow it has dwindled. Critical medical anthropology, Manav has given us enough evidence to do critical medical anthropology, and this is a right place to do so. Critical biomedical and biocultural anthropology, forensic anthropology is very well known to all of us, but improved methods and the multidisciplinary approach to forensics will be also necessary. Climate change and health of populations. This is something which we should embark into, and this is at the right time actually to see this, because there are many options which can be adopted by the biological anthropologists in collaboration with the sociocultural anthropologists to study effects of climate change on health. Urban human biology. We have no choice but to have urban settings, and the percentage of urban settings much more day by day, over time. So the pollutants, the urban environmental pollutants, and the re-emergence of the infectious diseases, all kinds of things in the urban settings will lead us to take challenge of the studies on urban human biology. Anthropology of sports. Of course, this is a quite of a well-known topic, and many multidisciplinary approach should be given. Multidimensional physical growth and development studies. Enormous amount of those studies have been done cross-sectionally in the small communities with small samples, just to study variation. There is no attempt for any genetic epidemiological study of growth, and there is no sort of even attempt to make the growth standards. So these are certain issues which are to be taken into consideration. Of course, biocultural dimensions of aging. The number of researchers doing growth studies is much more compared to studies on aging. These two biological processes are challenging for the sake of variation, evolution, and adaptation. So aging studies should be given high priority, I must say. Study of health in the lifespan approach. A lifespan approach is something which tells you about the adaptability of this particular group to a kind of an environment. So this is also an adaptation studies, and lifespan approach in health will be very important one. Microbiome in human body and health issues. This is also coming up very fast, and anthropologists should also be involved in this kind of studies. Bioanthropology of small communities, and of course, non-human primate studies. This is not an exhaustive list, but I think these have not got major attention of biological anthropologists in India, and therefore they can have a sort of hold on this. Among the great populations, I believe, ancient DNA makes most sense, and of course, you have other colleagues in other disciplines who have already done many of these studies, and anthropologists are lagging behind in this thing. And I think there are options open where you can also do that. Of course, this is not a very easy job to be done, but there are possibilities, you can make possibilities to do so. And of course, ethical issues in biological anthropological research. There are many things that can be done in this particular field. What we have done is, we just hunt for our ethics clearance certificates and just nothing else. We don't give much valued thought on ethical issues in our data collection, in our publication, and so on. So this is to be considered very, very seriously, I believe. The list is definitely not exhaustive, but some of are overlapping also in nature, and therefore the message is, these are certain things which should get much more attention in this particular venture. Yes. So now, how we can do? We are not masterpieces and all kinds of methods. It's not possible for 2 years or say maybe about 4, 5, 6 years. We have our own individual limitations. So therefore, for the sake of the survival and growth of the subject or discipline, you have to have collaborative efforts. I don't say that collaborations are not taken place. They have been there, and we also go through collaborations, but frequency of collaboration, type of collaboration, nature of collaboration should be expanded, I believe. The individual bioanthropologists and social cultural anthropologists of the same department, maybe of the different department, I emphasize this because what I have told you before, the mention of the topics will definitely need those collaborative effects. Bioanthropologists and researchers of other disciplines of human biology, of course, we deal with human biology, and of course, there are many other disciplines which also do that. The difference between them and us is they only deal with human individuals, but our prime focus on human groups. Of course, they have their community physiology, they have their own, biochemical variations of different communities, and also you have public health or community medicine. Therefore, there are reasons of collaboration, and therefore, to make it more viable and more meaningful, biological anthropologists should also collaborate with them, depending on, of course, the choice of the project and the question that you would like to answer. Biological anthropologists and ecologists, zoologists, botanists, agricultural scientists, and so on, depending on the type of project that you have taken. For conservation, of course, you can have a collaboration with the ecologist or the zoologist. For ethnobotanical studies, you can collaborate with the botanists and so on. Appropriate collaboration with the statisticians. If you go to a ethnobotany or botany conference, you don't find much of an anthropologist. You only find botanists. Why? Because they have taken that into their domain, where the anthropologists have been very less in this particular area of investigation. Of course, there are examples who have done good job, good research. Appropriate collaboration with the statisticians is absolutely necessary if you deal with quantitative data. And most of the biological data are quantitative in nature, and therefore you have to have a very fruitful collaboration with the statistician. Collaboration between individual anthropology departments in India and abroad, national and international collaboration. There could be MOUs between one department and the other, at very different levels. We don't find them to happen in India. But if you see, in the world scene, there are many collaborations going on between one country and the other, between one state and the other, and therefore they have the purpose of growth. And formation of bioanthropology network, and this was actually, haunting me for quite some time. We don't know each other much. We don't have the opportunity to actually exchange our ideas. Yes, X comes for taking a PhD viva, or Y goes for a MSc dissertation viva, but we do not have any platform where we come and informally discuss things. So, a network is very, very important, and I believe biological anthropology, a resource-poor subdiscipline of anthropology, should actually take up this challenge. There could be national, there could be a regional network. For example, in northeastern states, there are 7 or 8 northeastern states, and there are 5 universities. They can have a sort of network and see how northeast anthropology produces knowledge production, and also relevant biological anthropology for the people of Northeast. Collaboration between anthropology departments and national institutions, for example, ANSI. ANSI is a very big institution. ANSI's resources is quite substantial. For example, in the field of genomics, I understand that they have good labs. And anthropology departments can regularly send them, of course, on the basis of a MOU. Perhaps they are sending, but it can be a sort of, a regular basis. And not just a personal relationship based. Of course, I must say that the large-scale data generation is also very important. Surveys are necessary to give you clues for specific small-scale research to understand specific or answer specific questions. IBAS in the 1970s was an exemplary example of All India Bioanthropological Survey conducted by Anthropological Survey of India. And I think I would request the director here to launch another All India Bioanthropological Survey if it is possible. Networking among the teachers necessary for regular curriculum and research update. I mentioned about the research possibilities. Now I think I must also touch upon teaching, because the experiences of day-to-day teaching
50 years
is not with me, because I did not have the opportunity to be a full-time teacher in a postgraduate department throughout my career. But I had the opportunity to teach in some of the universities here in West Bengal for some time, not very much. But then, overall, my hunch is teaching in bioanthropology requires regular periodic assessment with a focus to make synchronized approach for research motivation. The better you teach the particular topic, the more motivation will come for the teacher, for the student to engage him or her in that particular topic. So, I think something very, very important. This is something very, very important, and teachers should give stress on that. And of course, curriculum, as was also mentioned by Professor Rao about the curriculum update and the nuances of it, the pitfalls of it, but I think there are possibilities of improvement. Individual interest and motivation will certainly matter. We found that out of 5, maybe 1 is not at all interested and 1 is absolutely interested, but there has to be some kind of a balance to set the ball rolling and to get going. Understanding field-lab relationship and how these two remain complementary to each other is a very important question for biological anthropologists. I did not have any experience of lab in my career. But I have used results which are given by the lab. I should know every bit of lab science in order to be able to understand how results are available for my own analysis. And the lab people who have not gone to the field should know exactly what is meant by fieldwork in all its dimensions. Not just the data collection, as pointed out by Professor Srivastava, and your own feeling of getting into the community and extracting the most of it for the benefit of your research. We will require new institutions in India or old one in the new avatar. Our institutions are shrinking. It is our job to actually think how to improve the visibility of those institutions. When we fail, or we should try at least. New institutions can come not exclusively as anthropology institutions, they will be a multidisciplinary institutions for all practical purposes. And for biological anthropology, as for maybe other subdisciplines, we are going to lead a status report on biological anthropology detail. Yes, in all the departments, almost the 50-50 divide of teachers specialization in biological anthropology. But what exactly biological anthropologists contributed in the Indian scenario in this last century, or for that matter, first 20 years of this century, we have to take note of. Yeah, please. My saying is, of course, biological anthropology in India is what biological anthropologists do. It will be to answer the unanswered questions of biological anthropology and making many of these answers, creating niche for human development in India. This is how things are to be moved on a theoretical level, how the modus operandi has to be worked out. Let us open the dialogue. Let us open the dialogue very seriously and find out our lacunae, find out our strengths and weaknesses. Let's dream big and act accordingly. Thank you so much.